We are live.
Hello. Happy Friday afternoon, everybody. We have a very exciting guest today. It's Ryan Davis. Ryan is a COO and the co-founder of a company called People First, which makes a business out of influencers. And Ryan is actually quite an influencer himself. So he is absolutely authorized to tell us about why marketers are fascinated with influencers and the love affair that business has been having with influencers for quite a while. So here we are. Welcome, Ryan. And we are all ears.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This is a great way to spend a Friday afternoon, and I love the intro music.
the default rock and roll theme music. By the way, there's something about the way that StreamYard does that where I want it to fade like another second longer. There must be a way to do that. Sorry, Ryan, go ahead.
Well, I think why are marketers obsessed with influencers? I think because we've had this trend in marketing where people, they want to feel connected and authentic when they're dealing with a brand or an organization. And it's really tough for top-down communication, top-down marketing to kind of bring that authenticity in a real way. And working with influencers and creators, and when I say influencers, I could mean somebody who has 1,000 followers or somebody who has 10 million followers, but that allows you to kind of translate your message into the language of that person and allows you to sort of communicate in a more direct one-on-one way that feels more authentic to the audience. And so it's sort of like a hack to make your brand feel more like a person.
Ryan, do you feel like it's kind of just an offshoot of what people used to do with DJs from radio shows, and they would do their? Is it that kind of in a new form, or is it something different?
I think that's a great question. I think that when influencer marketing, like capital I influencer marketing started, there was like a really big focus on really popular influencers, Mr. Beast and these folks who have millions of followers. And I think those are sort of celebrity endorsements in the same way that, when I was growing up, Jerry Seinfeld did the American Express.
Yeah.
I wanted an Amex because Jerry Seinfeld had one. And so I think that was sort of capital I influencer. But what we're seeing now and the trends are more niche, right? So it's instead of getting a celebrity, it's getting people who look and feel like they're part of your in-group community. So you could go to church with, you could be on a sports team with, you could be neighbors with, but it's creating more sort of personal connections through those sort of like one-to-one relationships. So I think that's a trend that we're seeing. So there's obviously a place for those capital I influencers. They bring a lot of eyeballs, but when you really want to get people to consider something, purchase something, having somebody who looks like someone they might be friends with, might be in their family, I think that's it's really powerful.
So let me ask a question for all of you. What is the worst example of bad influencer marketing that any of you have seen recently? Did I stump you all?
I don't want to name any brands, but I think that, I'll talk about the Snoop Dogg thing, since I think that was a huge campaign. It came with a really clever, creative angle, and it performed so poorly that they ousted the CEO right after the campaign. And I think the reason why that happened was, and I wrote a bit about this, is Snoop Dogg's audience just doesn't overlap with people who are that interested in outdoor camping and outdoor recreation. He's got a much hipper, cooler audience, and they're not doing a lot of that. And so while it was super clever, and I'm sure whoever came up with the idea and the agency that came up with it, they felt really good about the giving up smoke. It didn't translate to sales because, Snoop Dogg's audience is not the kind of, they're not generally not the kind of folks who are that interested in that. So that's a great example of having a campaign super clever that doesn't translate to actually a good ad.
Yeah, so Ryan, I have a question on that. So would that be fair to say that strategy and thinking and segmentation and targeting is still the imperative kind of upfront work that needs to be done before the selection of the type of influencers and influencer work begins.
I think that's exactly it. I think if you are not approaching understanding who the audience of the influencer is, the type of content that the influencer typically creates, if it doesn't all sort of meld with the brand and the organizational voice that you're going to be promoting, it's not going to work. And so I think one of the things that we try to do is match the messenger with the message and make sure that that's all sort of connected and reinforces each other. And in the Snoop Dogg case, you didn't have that. But if you had, say, worked with 50 different families who are camping families, and you had them talk about how great it is to have this stove when they go camping, they're communicating to the exact kind of people who are interested in that activity. So it wouldn't have been as sexy. It wouldn't have got, as much press, but it probably would have sold a lot more, of those smokeless stoves.
Well, I'll build on that a little bit so I had this experience probably about a year or so ago where I was talking to this guy who's the marketing lead for a very small restaurant company based out of somewhere in Arkansas. And he had called me up and he was asking me like, hey, what should we be spending? How much should we be spending on our influencer marketing program? And I literally was like nothing, because I think it goes back to what Elena was just saying. It's not just, are you strategically aligned in terms of who's delivering the message and do they appeal to the people that you're trying to talk to, but also, is this the right way to deliver strategically the message? Is just the right channel, right, that you should use? And so, in this case, it's like you'd be much better off, going to a bunch of churches and giving, coupons away than you would be. So actually, this was I think I told you before we started that I was going to throw you for a loop. And that was kind of my question was, I was going to try to throw you for a loop, was about, what is the sort of smallest sized company that, should even be thinking about influencers, or does it not matter? And it could be any size company. It just has, what do they need to think about?
Yeah, I think it really could be any size company. So I think your idea of going to, I remember going to church as a kid and coming out and somebody had papered all the cars with, an advertisement for lunch, and that definitely works. And I think that when you work with a local influencer who's got 1,000, 2,000 followers, it's sort of the digital version of that. And maybe you're not spending more per influencer than you would to print 200 or 300 flyers. But also you get to use that content as digital advertising. So, Jeff, you post how much you like this chicken place. You do it in paid partnership with, and then they can take that ad and boost it directly to the audiences that they want to have see it. So even if you may not have a ton of followers in Huntsville, they can scale that content and it'll feel really local. And that's sort of like, to your callback about the DJ, that's sort of like having that local DJ, maybe it's a local community leader, it's a local teacher, it's somebody who's got community credibility. And, when I was a kid, it was always the people doing the community theater who started in the local TV ads. So it's sort of an extension of that.
So can I ask actually kind of following on Jeff's point, the channel question, right? There's different channels, and the channel is going to be very key to, based on what product you're having. But when you think because when I think of influencers, I'm pretty much thinking about YouTube influencers, TikTok influencers, etc. I imagine you have a more sophisticated world of influencers.
Well, YouTube and Instagram and Facebook, these are networks that are not that niche that sort of everybody's on, any demographic. But, if you want to speak to suburban women in the Midwest, you might want to have a Pinterest influencer strategy. If you want to speak to, tech bros, you might want to have an X influencer strategy. If you want to speak to, B2B, we do a lot of B2B work. LinkedIn is where you'd want to be. So again, I think this is sort of part of the planning. There's those networks that kind of almost always make sense that, everybody's on them. And then there's the networks where if you have very specific niche audiences, if you want to talk to baby boomers, you're not going to do it on Snapchat. But if you want to talk to their kids, you might do it on Snapchat.
Interesting, Ryan. I have a question back to what you were saying about matching the influencers to a business that wants to run a certain program. And my question is, how do you find these influencers? How do you recruit them? And also, when you recruit them, how do you make sure that they keep their authentic voices? And even though that they're pumping a certain business, they are still a trusted influencer.
Great question. So we recruit them through two different ways. We have a technology that allows us to identify and ingest a lot of data. We've got a database that we built over the last 4 years, and there's a lot of commercially available databases. But I think what sets us apart and allows us to sort of recruit that precision voice is we built a digital relational organizing team. And these are folks that actually go out into the internet and find the exact type of folks that you're looking for. Here's your product for single moms in 7 cities. We can go find those women and authenticate them and collaborate with them. So it's a mix of technology and organizing. And then great question is, how do you keep it authentic? And that's by understanding that, and we go back and forth with clients about this all the time. When you hand over some of the creative power to an influencer, you have to feel okay with that. Like, you can give them the messaging, you can give them the do's and the don'ts and the things they should definitely include and the call to action, etc. But the more space you give them to speak to their audience, because you're hiring them because they know how to speak to single women in these 7 cities, right? Better than you do, or else you wouldn't be hiring them.
Right.
You've got to give them a little, you got to give them some leeway, and not be super precious about. It's not a Super Bowl ad. It's going to have more of a lo-fi feel. It's going to feel authentic. It's going to look like content that people produce and engage with on the internet. So I think it's a lot of marketers understanding that this is not a Wes Anderson directed commercial, and it's not going to look like that. And if you want Wes, you got to pay for Wes. And giving over a little creative control to the people who know how to talk to the audience you want to reach.
I will say, so my last role, Ryan, was I worked in Cracker Barrel, and for a number of years I was the head of marketing at Cracker Barrel, and the team was would work on influencer programs, and we would sometimes run into these problems where we asked some influencer to post about us, and then the post would be something that had nothing to do with what we were hoping for, and I think it would create a lot of sort of frustration of, hey, we're sort of not using this money on the, the flip side is we would sometimes, sort of luck into, essentially organic, influencer marketing. Like one time Lauren Elena was like super into Cracker Barrel, and we somehow knew this, and she maybe posted something about it. So we sent her a box that had a pool floaty that was in the shape of a fried chicken, leg, and fried chicken socks and whatever. And like, she literally just did like an unboxing, TikTok or something, or whatever. And it was awesome.
Chicken themed stuff.
Yeah, I think there are 2 different ways to do it, right? If you're doing the gifting strategy, and I think that can work with like a brand that's well known enough, and you have people who are fans of, they're going to open that box, they're going to be excited about it, they're going to probably post for free or close to free, but you're not going to have any control over the message of that content. My philosophy is, if you pay everybody a little bit of something, that gives you that right to edit that content, to be more specific about what you want. So in general, almost always what we do is we get that draft of the creator's content, we check it with the brief, make sure that there's nothing that's a flag, and then if we have to make any edits, we go back and we collaborate with the creator, and then when the client sees the content for final approval, hopefully it's where it needs to be. And by paying people, you have a bit of a carrot where you can get them to kind of make the message feel both authentic to them, but also obviously serve your business purposes.
How do people? Do you just kind of like trip and fall into becoming an influencer, or is it like most people have spent a couple of years building up their channel? How does one become a target of people first as an influencer?
Well, So you know the old saying, like 90% of the people are just sort of lurking, and the 10% are creating the content. You know, that's sort of been true for the internet for like a long time, and that's still true today. In fact, we just saw a Pew poll a couple of weeks ago showing that the vast majority of TikTokers are just followers. They're not creating the content. So there are definitely people who are out there who want to be influencers, and they're strategic about it. They go, my niche is I'm a family influencer, or I'm a travel influencer, or I'm fashion. And those people are great. And you know, we work with a lot of those people. But I also think it's really powerful to find folks who haven't done any influencer work to endorse a product. Because one of the things you run into with some people who are like really pursuing influencer work is you'll look at their profile and they've endorsed, 15 products in the last month. And, the thing about Jerry Seinfeld, he didn't do Discover Card and Amex, right? Like he was an Amex guy. And so, I think when you work with micro influencers who are not people who are going out there and chasing that influencer dream, you get a little more authentic content. It's a little fresher, and their posts are mostly about family and normal things that people post about, and then maybe they occasionally post about a brand. So that's what we're looking for. We're trying to find people, teach them how to become creators, and getting them to make that content.
So here's my secret question: do you need any twinfluencers?
Oh, talk about pumping themselves.
I think Double Mint Gum, they should go back to that.
There you go. There was like there's some big names. There's the McKnight twins, Brooklyn and Bailey are big names, and there's a couple of twin big name twinfluencer types. I don't know if Jeff and I are actually on the list yet.
Yeah, we're very early days, but there is like this weird fascination with twins, right? I mean, like, people just like, they think somebody once asked Eric and me, like, do you know what the other one's thinking? And I'm like, I do right now. But people have this sort of fascination with twins and so forth. So I don't know. We think we're gonna see if we can make a run at that. We'll see what happens.
All right. But I do have another question for Ryan. So Ryan, you were just talking about influencer dream, right? A dream of being an influencer, and many kids have that very vivid dream. So we have definitely, especially with the prominence of TikTok, we have seen a lot of very young influencers, right? So talk to us about that, and how is that shaping up? Because especially like when we talk about, older influencer or adult influencers, they know better. They know how to work with businesses. They know how to convey the messages. They have better judgment. Kids influencers are very young, like influencers. It's a whole different story. So interested to hear your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, it's complicated. So I think there are kid influencers whose parents probably do a really good job of balancing their the health of their kid and the business of their kid, just like there are parents who are good with child actors. And I think there are probably parents who are not nearly as good at that, and who use their kids to promote things that probably don't make sense and won't look good in 10 years or look good on their college application. So when we work with young influencers, family influencers, we're dealing with the parents in terms of the negotiation, and we're making sure that the product is like a real fit. Like we don't want anything to be feel inappropriate or not like boost the kid's self-esteem, or be something that he or she would look back on in a few years and be like, I can't believe I did that. So and I think it's up to us as marketers to also sort of have our guards up and just make sure that we're negotiating in good faith when we're working with these young influencers.
So I'm gonna switch gears for a second and just ask you a question: is what group of brands or clients are out there that aren't thinking about using influencers that should be using influencer marketing?
I actually think that because of the way that travel and beauty and fashion influencers have positioned themselves, that a lot of people think about influencers really in those verticals. When we see influencers as something that can work on like a B2B side. Everybody has like a niche where they are experts in something. And, you might be selling some kind of like fancy CRM software, and Eric might be an expert on CRMs and be interested in talking about that on LinkedIn. So I think it's breaking out of this idea that influencers are just those beautiful folks who are sipping Mai Tais in Tahiti and can really be anybody, because everybody's a consumer and everybody has opinions about the things that they consume. And, I think, toward your friend with the small business, I think smaller businesses can even begin to think about how to work with a handful of influencers in their local community to create content and create buzz. If I'm from Salisbury, Maryland, as a university on campus, and that university powers all those fast food restaurants around the neighborhood. So I would find 5 college kids who are super cool on campus to host my sub shop once a week, and you probably only would have to give them some subs and you kind of react.
It might work well.
Yeah.
Do you do any, like, they used to talk about, I'm sure this is still a thing, but like this kind of guerrilla marketing, where you actually send somebody paid into, make sure that they have the Bud Light can facing the right way or whatever it is, maybe Bud Light's a bad.
Bud Light might be a bad example.
Yeah, bad example.
Bud Light had some challenges with influence.
For all the wrong reasons, but yeah, go ahead.
It's funny. Like one of my very first jobs in New York when I was 18 was I worked at TKTS, which is a discount ticket booth. And I was a flyer guy, so I walked up and down, the line, like handing out flyers and promoting shows. And we would do sort of guerrilla style stuff. If there was a camera for MTV at the time, like filming, like, it'd be my job to make sure I got the Chicago the Musical sign like on the background there. So I did a lot of that when I was young, and I think about. And I also worked in politics a lot and did a lot of canvassing. And I think about what micro influencers specifically is sort of that. It's like digital door knocking, or it's like digital flyering. You're not reaching a ton of people, but you're kind of having small conversations about something with a bunch of folks that are kind of strong tied and that you might have a relationship with. And it kind of reminds me of those flyering days.
Back to flyering days, I want to ask you a question about the evolution of influencers, right? So if we say, okay, let's go back and start with the guerrilla days, and then digital unfolded, and there was all kinds of influencers, and now it's more streamlining. How do you think it evolved? And even more importantly, where is it going?
So I think it evolved out of like the most closely tied thing is affiliate marketing. And that's existed since like the dawn of the internet. So you give me a link and I put it on my blog or I put it on my website and I make 1% for every book you sell. So I think that is sort of the beginnings of digital influencer. I think, you can see it starting to, when people start to build these online personas that are really big. This doesn't happen until 2008, 9, like YouTube and Facebook sort of allow that. And then people become bigger than broadcast. I mean, somebody like Mr. Beast is basically his own TV network. He's got 20, 30 million people tuning into every video. So that's never happened before. That's like an episode of Friends in the 90s, right? Mm-hmm. So I think you saw that evolution. I think that the next sort of stage is bringing sort of affiliate back to influencers. So working with influencers on performance level. So I'm getting like a stipend to post, but then I'm getting paid a percentage of every, pair of jeans that I sell. I think that marketers are looking, I started, when I was doing social media in the mid-aughts, people were like, what's the ROI on this? And we couldn't really tell you. Like we had to work on that. And now we can give you like really sophisticated ways to do ROI on social. I think that's coming to influencer. A lot of clients want to have, much more specific measurements. They want to understand conversions. And I think that that's part of the maturing of the category. And then I think that the capital I influencers, because they're so expensive, because they don't deliver as good of results, I think they'll always be a part because they always want to have those sort of celebrity endorsements. But I do think the UGC, the user-generated content, the smaller influencers, really where it's at if you want to have that sort of authentic, conversations. Keep people who are not like going to embarrass your brand by doing something crazy and big on the internet. So I do think that folks are looking more and more at those smaller creators.
And going back to what Elena asked, other than the imminent rise of twinfluencers, what's next in the field? What are you seeing that somebody who's not in this influencer space would be surprised, that that's going to happen next?
So one of the things we've been talking about for a long time in this country is social commerce and live shopping, and it just hasn't taken off. It's huge in Asia. I think there's a lot of reasons why.
What does you mean by that? Like
that means that basically, like, those TV shows where it's like you dial 1-800 whatever, and you home shopping network.
Yeah.
It's bringing that to
internet.
Bring that to social. So if you're watching a TikTok influencer, they're wearing a dress that you think your daughter would look cool in, and you click and you buy it right from the platform.
Okay.
This is already really big in other parts of the world. It's been slow to take off in the US, but TikTok and Meta are invested in it. They're interested in it. There's a lot of money in it for them, and I think that kind of shopping experience and being able to sort of purchase direct from social platforms is where this is all headed. I think there's a conflict though between that and people's desire to like not feel like they're watching an ad. So it'll be really interesting to see how you sort of balance that, where
it's like the evolution of product placement.
Yeah, this behind me is for sale, and I'm subtly selling it, right? But I'm not like, moving at every 2 seconds and being like, isn't this a great painting?
What do you think is different between the US market and these other markets that's slowing it down?
There's been a lot of speculation on this. I think that they just, some of their social channels were a little more aggressive about social commerce, earlier on, and just sort of the tactical ability to do it. And I think US consumers, we have Amazon. We just have a different sort of culture in how we purchase things. And I do think that younger consumers are sort of less tied to that, and they're going to be interested in, engaging in this sort of more social version of commerce.
Do you think, Ryan, it could also have something to do with big network owning the content, especially around celebrity, and trying to just kind of pump it through their own channel?
Yeah, I think that probably marketers were hesitant to give up, the power. But what you're having is now influencers just creating their own brands. Why wait for a jean company to come to you when I can just, make jeans and sell them myself and make all the margin, So I think you're going to see some interesting sort of democratization of some of these creators actually creating their own brands. You already see it in like candles and things like that. But I would see this kind of continuing to evolve where creators might create all sorts of things that they end up selling.
So there's twinning strategy jeans. Is that what you're thinking?
Well, I was going to say twinning strategy bourbon. I feel like everybody.
They have 4 legs.
I feel like that we had to. I mean, I don't know anything about bourbon, but it's a good idea. It's a good idea.
I mean, I don't know, like, or tequila seems to be. There's that whole sort of cultural appropriation problem with tequila, but we are coming up against the end of the half hour, so perfect timing for us to go completely goofy at the end here. But maybe we can do a little recap. Ryan, why don't you kick us off with what your thought is for the day?
Well, I actually wanted to give a shout out to Crackle Barrel, because I remember going on family trips, and we would go to a Crackle Barrel and buy a book on tape, because they always sold books on tape, and this is pre-podcast days, and so I have such fond memories of sitting in the rocking chair, getting the chicken fried steak, and buying whatever the latest Stephen King novel was on cassette, thanks to Crackle Barrel.
Yeah, we did some pretty cool influencer stuff in Cracker Barrel. But I guess I'll just sort of say my takeaway is really this idea of that Elena, actually, you brought up earlier of you gotta really think through the marketing strategy to drive your influencer strategy. So I think that's really key. I'll pass it to you, Elena.
So I find it fascinating, and we have touched on it, the creator economy and how influencers will play into that by allowing social commerce. So I think it's going to be very interesting how, instead of Etsy, we might have Insta Etsy and Tick Etsy and whatever they're going to call it. So that's very cool. And my second observation, this was one of the quickest half hours.
That's great. So my thing, and Ryan, when I asked you for what you were going to find surprise, or that what I might find surprising, or as a non-influencer focused person, I wasn't really sure whether you're going to come up with something that really surprised me, but it really is not something I've thought about. The sort of click and buy while you're watching the show, click and buy while you're watching the stream, etc. I guess one thing I wonder is because social media has obviously gone a long way to democratize the ability to make content. And then there's this sort of constant push and pull in terms of that democratization. And then you get these, the capital I influencers, et cetera. But I wonder what that does, that sort of, that, in-stream, marketing, in-stream commerce is going to be really interesting to see where that goes. So excited to see where it is. Well, thank you again, Ryan. This was fantastic. And I agree, Elena, another quick half hour. So thank you, everybody. And we will see you next time.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan.
Bye.